All right, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we never have a shortage of conversations, but I think this one was an interesting one because I'm not sure that either of us knew much about any of these topics until we prepare. Usually we have a little
Yep.
bit of knowledge, a little
Yep.
bit, but these are new. These are completely new, right?
Yeah, they are. We had to do a little bit of research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so let's get into our word of the week. So for our word of the week, Lisa, once again, isn't it interesting how human behavior, like we're trying to find or craft language to describe human behavior that already exists, or is emerging or starting to exist. And so when I heard about this particular word, I thought to myself, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. It just didn't have a word to it, but here we are with the language. But the language we're talking about today is micro shifting, micro shifting. So when you think about a shift of work, whether it's in an industrial area like where I grew up, where you have first shift, second shift, third shift, right? It's talking about micro shifting, smaller shifts, the practice of breaking up the workday into short, flexible blocks of time rather than adhering to this continuous 8 hour stretch that we're all used to. And in fact, it's kind of been an all or nothing thing, Lisa, whether a traditional 8 hour stretch works for some people or completely doesn't work for other people. It sounds like now this micro shifting can really work for the people that don't have to be all or nothing when it comes to a work shift. And so think about the flexibility of non-linear work blocks, shorter shifts. You can schedule your shifting based on your energy, right? So instead of really taking that complex, difficult meeting at your lowest point of energy, maybe you can schedule it at a different time, or you have a project that needs a lot of concentration, but usually the only time you have to do it is when you have the least amount of energy or the least amount of focus. You can now switch that up, right? And let's all thank Gen Z and the millennials that are driving this trend, right? And part of the reason why I think we should thank them for this is that they are prioritizing their mental health, their flexibility, and their autonomy. So they are more than happy to do the work and at the same time redefining work that can still be useful. Because, Lisa, I don't know about you, but I've been in a number of situations where I was either obviously being supervised or supervising someone else where they were, on the clock. They were always at work on time. They left right on time. They worked their full shift, but at the same time, what was the quality of that work? I can't say the quality of that work was the greatest. I mean, I remember one person that was cash for, okay, we're supposed to clock in at 9, but I'm going to gingerly take 45 minutes to go get my coffee. And then I'm going to speak to every single human being in the suite for a number of minutes. So by the time you pared it down, this person probably really worked like a full 3 hours. I mean, let's just be real with it, right? And so with that, I'm not saying don't be friendly. I'm not saying don't get your coffee because me and Lisa feel very strongly about our coffee. But what I am saying is, are we talking about productivity or are we talking about tradition here? And so I think it's a really cool concept that I didn't know that I was doing previously. But Dr. Lisa, had you heard of this word before and or had you functioned in this way before possibly and you just didn't have a word to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the Pomodoro, right? Where you set your
Ah,
little
yes.
tomato timer or whatever for 30 minutes or whatever and do some dedicated work. But um, when you were talking right at the beginning and you said something related to the 8 hour day, it just kind of reinforced to me that this is a uniquely USA thing. Not the micro shifting per se, but the fact that we need to develop a different way of working to protect mental health, create more flexibility and autonomy for workers, right? Because of the way that kind of the work culture has evolved here, this 40 hours a week, 8 to 5, you're not working unless you're in the office, this mentality that doesn't, it's not that that doesn't exist at all in other countries, but the work week is often a lot shorter in other countries. 35 hours a week, 36 hours a week, sometimes less than that, right? Um, and to your point about productivity, I've definitely taken my sweet ass time to go to the restroom, fill up my water bottle, you know, stop and chat with someone. The
That's funny.
benefits of being in an office environment. So, and I think that's where some of this push, it's not micro shifting, I don't think, but this push to say, okay, we know that there's a lot of um, fluff, I guess, in a
Mm,
40-hour work week. So
mm-hmm,
what is it that you actually need to do and how long will it actually take you to do that thing? And then that becomes your work week, right? So like you could actually
mm-hmm,
do 3 days of 8 hours. And if you worked for the 3 days of 8 hours, you'd actually get all of your stuff done and you didn't need a week that work those extra 2 days. And I know that that
mm-hmm,
has been shown to improve productivity. And there are
mm-hmm,
some versions of that happening. It's not micro shifting, obviously, because it's still kind of operating on that block, that large block of time. But it's all
mm-hmm.
kind of coming from the same idea, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate that it's coming from the same idea of prioritizing what's important while also participating in a workforce that does
Right.
need you.
Yeah.
So, what's more important, taking my sweet time to go to the bathroom a few times a day or getting out of work, you know, an hour earlier than traditional so that I don't have to break my neck going to pick up my kids or take care of some other at-home responsibilities. People are now saying that the fluff that you mentioned, the fluff of work, that's nice, but that's not as important and it's not integral to the work that they do. They're making some very intentional decisions about that. And I think that ends up being the conflict with traditional
Yeah.
notions of
Yeah.
employment, and I hate to even say traditional, non-traditional, but past and present, past needs and present needs.
Yeah.
Past needs
Yeah.
were men who didn't have to take care of anything but go to work all day versus current, everybody wants to, or many people want to go to work and they have different responsibilities, are more than willing to work, but they just need a little bit of flexibility to make it happen. We're not
Mm-hmm.
talking about the same thing anymore. We're just not.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think this calls us to interrupt some of the narratives of people don't want to work. No,
Yeah.
actually, people are struggling to work within contexts that were never created for the majority of us to work.
Yep. Yep. 100%.
I think that's where we're going with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's dive into phase one. All right. So, look, this is not a new topic, but it is a new angle when it comes to AI because we have talked about AI quite a bit, our fears, our hesitancies about AI, but now we're on a new plateau, Lisa, with the foolishness related to the use of AI. So, I get ever so often articles from Forbes, and Forbes.com has an entire article that talks about OpenAI blocking Sora deepfakes on Martin Luther King after, quote, disrespectful depictions, right? Now, we'll link this in the show notes, of course, so you can go see this for yourself. But Lisa, I had been running across some of these videos that were much milder, in my opinion, um, for a number of weeks, maybe a month or so. Where on Instagram, there would be, for example, when this is long after the Target boycotts had happened, but it was Dr. King in AI speaking to people saying, hey, shop elsewhere, or, make smart decisions, or whatever it was. I was like, that's a little cringeworthy because if I were part of the King family, I just wouldn't want it.
Yeah.
But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it wasn't cursing, it wasn't necessarily violent, it wasn't anything, but it could have been considered violent to his family. So I just want to point that out. So I didn't think too much more of it. Then maybe we should put a whatever the warning is on this one, Lisa. More recently, I saw another one where it was a AI video depiction of Dr. King holding a microphone on a stage uh, as a comedian telling a joke. And the short version of the joke basically was Dr. King JFK and I forget what the other person was, but three individuals show up to a bar and then pause. They got quote unquote shots, as in the drink of a shot, but we know the double
Mm-hmm.
entendre that comes with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was horrified, thinking, "Oh my God, okay, this shit is not entertaining. This is not funny. This is not." And I'm saying this as someone that's far from removed from the King family, so I can only imagine his children, grandchildren, etc. Then fast forward once again, Trey sends me a video also of Dr. King speaking about something. And so, as the mom who also doubles as a teacher, I
Mm-hmm.
have to ask some questions, knowing that it's not real, but I know that it's not real, but I'm having to guide him through questions to make sure that he has a more developed discernment of what's real and what's not.
Yep. Yep.
I asked him the question, all right, honey, let's go back into our history lessons here. What year was Dr. King no longer with us? He said 1968. Correct. Very good. Now, what year was this video made based on? It was like a little copyright or some type of tag or stamp on it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said 2025. And I said, okay, Dr. King was gone in 1968. This is 2025. Is this real or not, son? He says, no, this is not real. Okay, I said, good. Now, every time you see a video of this sort, I want you to think through what we know, maybe even Google to think about what
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
know. And let's use our critical thinking so we can discern between what people are crafting and what's reality. Because he had also seen Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech in color, in fact. And so he knows what Dr. King looks like, et cetera, et cetera. He knows his voice. The AI
Mm-hmm.
voice was even perfectly on pitch, Lisa. I mean, that's how
Mm.
incredible it was. So fast forward to now, where OpenAI has blocked Sora from developing such disrespectful and I would even suggest some distasteful videos. Meaning that Sora, based on what I've researched and learned about this particular form of AI, is that I can either say words to the app or I can type in words to the app to describe what I want to depict. And then it will
Mm-hmm.
spit out a depiction of what I've asked for. So someone had to say, hey, let's make a video depiction of Dr.
Yeah.
King as a comedian on a stage saying da 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 da, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so with that now, pausing on the development of this Sora tool in such a way that they can really get clear on what are going to be the parameters, if they can even put any in place, around the use of this tool. Now, of course, there's been a request from Dr. King's estate. Of course, he still has living children, obviously, but I've seen other ones that weren't even Dr. King. I've seen Tupac, I've seen Aaliyah, other people that weren't necessarily civil rights movements, but I'm thinking
Right.
about family. Like I'm just imagining in my mind. Everyone who knows me knows I adore my grandparents. My grandfather passed 11 years ago. If I happened upon a video of my grandfather in AI talking to somebody, I would be in shock. I might literally have like a visceral medical response to that shit if I saw it. And so I'm just imagining what the families are feeling. And so, Lisa, again, this is similar to what we've discussed before about the edges of AI, but I think it's just pushed the boundaries again. And so, I'm wondering because they ask in this particular article, how can they strengthen the guardrails around using the likenesses of historical figures and others without permission, right? I know there's some ethical pieces that you thought about before, but Lisa, how does this all strike you initially, given that this is like fresh off the press?
Well, I mean, I hadn't heard of this app Sora before, so that's new, but
Mm-hmm.
it's obviously the speed at which AI is developing and what people can do with it, right? Because the deep fake, the let's take the likeness of a famous person and have that famous person be doing something gross or sexual or something, right? Like that's been happening for several years. And as you were talking, it just struck me a little bit as it's not AI is not the problem as much as it is the humans who are thinking it would be funny to type in and request a video or an image that is disrespectful, distasteful, violent, whatever, right, of whether a historical figure or a living person. And so it's a little frustrating, I guess, um, for OpenAI as an organization to have to create some guardrails or some, uh, ar- around this because humans are just not trustworthy, right? Like they're just bad. There's just too many bad actors. And I don't mean
There
for that
you
to
go.
sound like
Yeah.
that's super naive, but like abstractly, the AI isn't the problem, right? AI can generate anything, but it has to be asked to generate the thing. Um,
Yes, 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 yes.
and so I think, I mean, like looking at the article here, and I do think that it makes sense that if you're a public figure or you are the family of a deceased public figure, then you should have some control over how that person's likeness is then utilized, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't, I mean, but the other piece of me is like, how do you even manage that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do you manage that? So, okay, so Shauna, you don't want pictures of your grandfather or videos being created, and so your family, like, do you have like you opt out? How do I mean I don't know how what's
Yeah.
the practical or logistical, how do you even do that when we know that AI is just this monster that is like growing and spreading and changing
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
such a rapid rate,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And the irony of all of that is, so for example, there is a photo of my grandparents together when they first got engaged, and it is pretty fuzzy. It's much older. My fear now is that the actual print of the picture will fall apart until we, get it kind of restored. But I asked Trey to use some of his AI tools and some of his art tools to fill in some of the color and also just some of the vagueness in their faces and so forth. Because we have
Okay.
other pictures that can be fed into AI to take, Granny and Pop's actual photos that are of good quality, filter them in, and
Yeah.
then enhance their engagement photo. That's one thing. But if he starts turning his head around and talking to me on the damn picture, I'm out of here.
Hmm.
I'm out of here. But what's funny, not funny about that is people have been doing that on a regular. Like a great example of this, Lisa. I hope you remember this video. You remember the Michael Jackson black or white video where
Yep.
everybody was turning their heads
Yep.
and it was like shape shifting, morphing
Yep.
into photos. It was such a great video, where the caption was, how do I explain to my kids that this isn't AI, right?
Yeah.
Because the assumption is that we've always been able to do this from, certain age younger. They think, oh, well, isn't that? No, these are real people. And somebody did some great videography with a lot more labor rather than feeding something into an app. Just to let
Yeah.
you know, we were able to do this before that. And I'm not saying don't use the app for certain things, but I think I think the guardrails, Lisa, are the problem. Not having them or not having them, but what are they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because our guardrails might be are completely different from other people's guardrails that think, oh yeah, I can just take someone that was unfortunately snatched away from us and create something that gets a haha or entertainment out of someone. Now that makes our skin crawl, but for them, they
Mm.
think, oh, this is art.
Yeah, well, and in that sense, oh, you just throwing in the art thing, right? Like outside of the joke that Dr. King is depicted as telling in that video, that, not that, but like someone using the likeness of a figure that they revere and they're doing some artistic rendition of that person and they're utilizing AI to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that different?
Right. I think it ends up being taste level, which is extremely subjective,
Yeah.
right? Like Lewis Hamilton's dog Roscoe just passed away.
Mm.
Are they going to depict him via AI and make him live again? Or are they just going to stick to the Lego art that I've seen before that's been actually really beautiful in detail? Again, that's a matter of taste. Some people would think that's tasteful to feed him into AI, and other people would be like, that's gross.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that it's the lack of guardrails or having them. It's what are they?
Well, and that's, I mean, we've talked to obviously the last couple of episodes free speech, right? And
Hmm.
that's the ongoing conflict or tension is should there be guardrails? And if yes, what are they and who decides, right?
Yes, 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 yes. Hmm.
You're making me think of that. Do you remember it was, I think it was this year, but there was a fairly reputable journalist on like CNN or MSNBC or some cable network that interviewed an AI rendition of a student that had died in a school shooting. And I can't remember if it was Parkland or which shooting it was, but it was
Oh
with
my God.
permission. It was with permission from the parents. And
Oh my God.
it was televised, I think. But I mean
Oh,
televised, right? Like you could go on
yeah, I
and
know
I'm
what you mean.
forgetting the details of it, but there was a lot of discussion there around tastefulness. So, but it was with the family's permission to do this. I mean, I don't know the details of how that came to be, but yeah,
Hmm.
like I think the intention was to try and understand how this kid was feeling at the time of the shooting. I'm not
Mm.
sure. I never watched it because I decided it was just it crossed a line for me ethically and
Yeah, yeah,
morally.
yeah, yeah.
Even with the parental consent, I was like, this doesn't feel good. So I don't really know, but I do remember seeing a lot about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to watch that. I mean, I just wouldn't. I have children in school. I can't watch that shit. I can't. Like, there used to be like TV shows, like, um, it could be CSI or other stuff that I used to be able to watch with uh, intimations of violence towards kids or related to school. I can't watch that. I haven't been able to watch that stuff for years.
Mm,
And so, but that's my guardrail. That might not be another.
yeah,
I mean, it kind of harkens back to what we talked about before with Mamie Till. I want
right,
them to
right.
see.
Yeah.
Let them see. So, yeah, it kind of harkens back to that a little bit around, what the family gives permission for and not to because we've talked about the other end of that, Lisa, about how are we feeding into the comfort of some that think that, oh, it's a fairy tale. Like we know we've seen the movies that talked about how gosh, what was the school shooting with the little kids in, gosh, when
Sandy
was it?
Hook.
Sandy Hook, thank you. How they tried to make that out to be a conspiracy, and the parents are like,
Yeah.
well, shit, now we actually do have to show some things because people don't even believe they're gone.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, what's your line to cross? What's your line in the sand? Because of course, as you can probably imagine, the majority of Bernice King's postings are about putting guardrails up around her father's likeness.
Yeah.
Like it's the majority of it. She'll tag people, please would you take that down? He has grandchildren now that are on social media and know what's going. I mean, like a lot of her posts are about those guardrails. And so I know it's subjective and up to those families, but I think we can have guardrails around what we choose to consume as well. I don't want to consume it.
Well, and what we choose to create, right? Because I go back to the point around,
Hmm.
well, she shouldn't even be having to go on to social media, see these things, and have to ask politely for these randos
There
to
you
take
go.
down some kind of representation that is less
Hmm.
favorable, right? I mean, and
Hmm.
even in the case of where it's a favorable representation, maybe you don't
That's
want that
right.
either.
That's
But
right.
I just think about, so this is
Oh,
bubble,
Abraham
this,
Lincoln. Sorry, it
okay.
was Abraham Lincoln. King, JFK, Abraham Lincoln were in that joke that I was mentioning before. Isn't that ridiculous? Okay, it finally came to me. Keep talking.
Oh
Go ahead.
my God. Oh, that's
Keep
funny. You
talking.
come right back around. Oh no, I think I know I've lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Um, no, that's okay. It probably wasn't anything. I think it was just,
Positive likenesses,
um,
possibly,
yeah.
because
No,
that's
that was
also a
it.
thing.
That was it. Like, there's probably all this stuff that is happening in parts of the web and chat
Hmm.
rooms, like your 4chans and your other places, that the fringes, like the ideological fringes and extreme
Hmm.
people who have extreme positions who are probably creating these kinds of AI
Hmm.
images and videos that would, that make that MLK, Dr. King joke pale in comparison, right? And we're
Oh, for
just not
sure.
seeing them because they're existing on these fringes. But I can only
Mm-hmm.
imagine the kind of stuff that is creating. And so, how do you even
Mm-hmm.
like? How do you even get at people who are doing that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what guardrail would
Mm-hmm.
limit that kind of abusive behavior that we are not even necessarily privy to, but could probably guess is
Mm-hmm.
happening?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And let me be clear, the company has said, quote, strong free speech interest in depicting historical figures is there, but also acknowledge that, quote, public figures and their families should ultimately have control over how their likenesses are used. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate that it seems to be some decorum, but it's a sticky point. It's a sticky
Yeah,
point.
I also don't trust OpenAI. I mean, the guy that runs that, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, but I think,
Mm-hmm.
he started off as it being like this philanthropic thing and it was like a nonprofit. And
Mm-hmm.
now I think he's just all about the money. I think he's a
Uh,
Trump, at least a
mm-hmm.
Trump adjacent person because it benefits him to be so. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I
Got
don't
you.
know.
Yep.
I think it's a
Yep.
watch this space. I wouldn't be surprised if this
Yes.
unfolds differently. Yeah.
Yep. Watch this space.
Hmm.
All right. Well, Lisa, take us to phase two.
Okay, so, unless you've been living under a rock, you have likely been had some awareness that there's something going on with the National Guard, right? In terms of how it's being utilized and where it's being sent. So I thought it might be helpful just to sketch out what the National Guard is, and then for you and I to have a conversation about when in history the National Guard has been federalized by the president, kind of the degree of severity those situations have, kind of how severe those situations are as compared to how it's being utilized today. Because one of the things I worry about is that there's just not enough knowledge or education to understand the degree of abnormality with the frequency that the National Guard is being deployed and federalized, right? And so I thought it might be beneficial for you and I to have a discussion. I mean, I guess I should caveat that with Shauna, neither Shauna nor I are experts on the National Guard, but we have opinions, which is always the case. So, um, what I thought, I looked up, right? Because I actually had to do a little schooling for myself. So there were a few things I knew about the National Guard, but not all of it. So there's actually only the Army National Guard and the Air Force National Guard. So there's no Navy National Guard. And they are a reserve military force and they are separate from like the Army Reserves or the Air Force Reserves, right? They're reserves that sit underneath kind of what you would understand to be the quote, quote, traditional military. And the National Guard is outside of that. And they are their governor, their state governor is the commander in chief, but they can be federalized by the president, which is going to be the topic of this conversation. In which case, then they would report up to the commander in chief at the federal level, which would be the president, right? But these are regular people, right? They have other jobs. They're most often deployed for state emergencies such as natural disasters, right? So Hurricane Katrina, there were National Guard troops deployed. They were not federalized, as we have learned in doing some digging, but they were deployed to help keep the peace and kind of provide, resources and manage logistics, in terms of all those people that had lost their homes and lost their belongings and kind of distributing food and aid and et cetera, et cetera. So they're paid a certain amount when they're called, but one of the critiques of the current situation is that, these folks are leaving, they've had to leave their full-time jobs, and they might have families, right? And they're being pulled away to these scenarios that arguably do not rise to the level of a
That's
National
it.
Guard deployment.
Mm-hmm.
They're being paid
Mm-hmm.
very minimally for that time, in which, and then they're not being, I think there's probably some payment that happens through their job, but it's not permanent, right? So if you're gone for like
Mm-hmm.
6 months or something, like it's gonna be financially stressful for you,
That's right. That's
depending on
right.
your financial situation. And the
Mm-hmm.
National Guard training, they have 1 week in a month. That's what you have to commit to is 1 weekend a month.
Mm-hmm.
There are 54 National Guard units, and they are based in each of the 50 states, plus DC, Guam, the US Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
So Okay, so let me share these 7 times that the President of the United States has federalized the National Guard. The first being the Civil War, so
We're
quite some
starting
time
off
ago.
great, Lisa.
Yeah.
Starting off great.
Then then we will be fast forwarding many, many decades to the desegregation of the schools in the southern states and the march from Selma to Montgomery. LBJ federalized the troops
Mm-hmm.
there because of all the
Mm-hmm.
violence that was enacted against the marches. And then we
Mm-hmm.
had the Detroit Uprising of 1967, which I actually don't know that much about. But right there, you've got three kind of
Mm-hmm.
fairly quick succession federalizing
Mm-hmm.
of the National Guard, in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Then late 1960s, back to Dr. King and his assassination. So there were riots after Dr. King was assassinated. So the National Guard was federalized and deployed then. And then we jump forward into the 80s and the 90s, and we have the Cuban refugee crisis of 1980. And this was also known as the Mariel boat lift, where Cuba
Mm-hmm.
sent a lot of Cubans, including prisoners, to
Mm-hmm.
Florida. There's a lot about that I didn't know, and I had recently learned
Yeah.
a little more about it, but that was a problem. And then the 1992 LA riots. So, and that
Mm-hmm.
would have been after Rodney King, right?
Mm-hmm.
1992 LA
Yep.
riots. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So,
Mm-hmm.
7 times, 7 times in the nearly 250 years, 7 times. So I'm stressing that because the federalizing of the National Guard 7 times in 250 years. And then in the last 3 or 4 months, we've had the deployment to Los Angeles, federalized National Guard, DC, which is a slightly different situation, which you and I have talked about before, Portland, Oregon, Chicago, Illinois, and then also there's talk now of New Orleans, Louisiana, and then Memphis has been kind of on and off again. And what's funny about Memphis, and I might have made this joke on another podcast, is that like the governor of Tennessee is like, I would be happy to have the National Guard come here. And I'm like, but you can deploy. You are the commander in chief of the state of Tennessee's National Guard. So you could just deploy them to help with quote unquote crime in Memphis, right? You don't need the president to federalize them to send National Guard troops into your own state. Like you're an
Mm-mm.
idiot,
Mm-mm.
right?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, so in quick succession, we've had boom, 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 all these places, and it's not looking like it's letting up. And there's obviously been multiple legal
Mm-hmm.
challenges, and then most recently, um, the administration has appealed to the Supreme Court about Portland because Portland was stopped because this is what we talked about before when I said that the
Right.
judge said it was like untethered to the facts or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But
Yep.
so, it's kind of crime to deal with crime. It's to um, enforce the laws, the federal laws, which in this case would be immigration. It's a bit kind of like loosey-goosey about the reasons that are provided. The National Guard can do local domestic law enforcement. The military, as in like the Marines, cannot, right? So I don't know what your thoughts are on this, how much you know about the National Guard in general, Shauna, and how you understand kind of the rapidity with which it's being utilized in the last 4 or 5 months as it kind of sits
Mm-hmm.
in relation to those very, very few times that previously the president has
Mm-hmm.
federalized the guard and sent them somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the just to fill in a little bit too, even with that the Detroit riots, basically it was a situation where the Detroit police raided this after hours bar, like in the wee hours of the morning, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. This bar was called the Blind Pig. That's why I remember this story.
Okay.
And it was in a predominantly Black area of the West Side. And at that time, of course, people were upset, so forth. They made some arrests. Someone threw a brick in a patrol car through a window of
Mm,
the patrol car. And then all of this just continues on and on and on for several days until by the time it was all over, it was over 40 people had been killed, over 300 and some people had been wounded, buildings, of course, burned down to the ground. It was a big deal. It was a big deal. And so the fact that I literally was just in DC proper for the first time in months, just 2 days ago. The amount of streets that are blocked off for no reason, the amount of detours you have
Mm,
to take for no reason, the places where you might want a little bit of extra security, like standing at the metro, nobody's there. Interesting.
mm.
It's just very off. And so, to fill in that little bit of information on Detroit, but also fast forward to say, as you can see, y'all, these 7 times, these are egregious. You should at least touch upon it in your high school US history class. It
Mm-hmm.
rises to that level versus I'm the president and I just think, based on my opinion and no data or facts, that there is violence in Black inhabited, Black led cities. So I'm going to send them there. Because Lisa, I think almost all of them, I need to look and see who the mayor of Memphis is. But out of the other cities that have been threatened, the lion's share of them have Black mayors.
I
They're
don't know
Black
about
mayors.
Portland. I think Portland's pretty whitey
I
McWhitey,
was
isn't it?
thinking Portland. I was thinking Portland or Memphis. I wasn't quite sure with those two, but the other ones I know do
Okay.
have Black mayors, and so that's why I'm like, oh, interesting. I
Yeah.
guess Black existence equates with crime. Interesting. Just
Well,
incredible.
yeah. That's not surprising that he would think that. I mean,
Incredible. Well, but that's why I'm so appreciative because I feel strongly that we should continue to support these mayors because these mayors are standing up to say absolutely not. Of course, I have to toot our horn here in Maryland that Governor Westmore, who did serve as a U.S. Marine for his
mm-hmm.
country, has said, I take this extremely seriously. This is not a game. This is very serious. And this is unlawful. This is unlawful deployment. So he is the commander in chief here in the wonderful state of Maryland. And so therefore, there will be no National Guard coming. Thank you very much. But again, that challenge and I always think of economies of time, right? Mayors are extremely busy. I mean, they are
Mm-hmm.
on the front lines of everything related to their city. To me, every time this guy threatens to send the National Guard, it's an economy of time because that mayor, if they even have one L of a backbone, has to spend their time fighting against their presence. It's
Right.
exhausting. I mean, and with that, I mean, especially here, I can speak quite a bit on Maryland, is that of course, we have the wonderful Governor Westmore, but then we also have a Black governor in this, a Black mayor in the city of Baltimore who's still trying to rebuild a freaking bridge amongst
Yeah.
everything else on his plate. And so, I think this is where, again, I love your point at the top of our time together is that again, let's be aware of how
Mm-hmm.
abnormal certain things are. And just because we're living in a time in history where, oh, it's we're just deploying National Guard like we're writing parking tickets around here. Like it's just what we do. No, it hasn't been historically what we do on a regular basis. So with that, this is going to be a very I keep saying this is going to be like the worst AP US history exam ever for kids in like 10 years to go back and think about all this shit because the National Guard technically has two reports. Their governor first, but possibly federal. And that's where Lisa, our rabbit trail comes in, where who's responsible and there's a timing
Mm-hmm.
piece to that deployment. Who's responsible? So when Lisa first read out the list to me, the very first thing that I thought about was, hold up, I know there were National Guard at in New Orleans for Katrina, but the distinction was who sent them? Who sent them? The
Mm-hmm.
specificity of the 7 is that a president sent them. The specificity of Katrina and other deployments across the country was that they were deployed by their governor, their commander in chief directly. And so, with that, I just want to keep reiterating how abnormal this is. I have a handful of friends and family members who were National Guard, and I understand their commitments and so forth from what they've shared with me. But beyond that, this is not normal. This is not normal. And so when I see some of the news coverage photos. There's one gentleman who I think I shared with you, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, but also a runner. And so he runs through the city every day that there's the government shutdown. He runs a mile for that day, if you will.
Hmm.
And he's doing this in attempt using his visual whiteness, using that in order to share with people who don't live here what's really going on versus what's on the news. And he's done like a really good job of covering that. And so with that, again, we're trying to demonstrate how abnormal this is. So please don't think that this, I'm trying not to use ableist language for my analogy here, but let's not think that this abnormality is normal when it's not. We are limping along in a way for when it comes to utilizing our military and or National Guard in ways that are inappropriate. And my thought is, oh my goodness gracious, what if something real happens? Like
Right.
National Guard, I don't need you picking up trash in the middle of the National Mall. I don't. I don't need
Yeah.
you. I need you to be prepared
Yeah.
for other more severe things, but not that. Um, and so
I
when
mean,
we,
it's definitely all a pretext, right? Like it's not, there's
oh, for
not,
sure.
Portland is not a war zone, nor is Chicago. And Governor Pritzker has actually been pretty good at pushing back on that messaging. I mean, and the administration is just saying that, in Portland in
Hmm.
particular, all of these um, uh, uh, politicians, they're deceiving the general public and they're lying about what's happening there, despite the
Oh
fact there's
yeah.
all
Oh
of
yeah.
these like films and images that you've got like dancing frogs and stuff. But
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
um, and apparently
And
the naked bike ride that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, apparently found to be very threatening.
well, here's the thing. What got me about Chicago in particular was that, you know, oh my goodness, Chicago is such a, violence-ridden city based on y'all's president saying that. But the very same weekend he was threatening to send the National Guard was also the same weekend that the Chicago Marathon
Hmm.
happened.
Yep.
Last
Yep.
time I checked, you don't let thousands of people run down the streets of Chicago unless you've secured it,
Yeah.
with or without the National Guard. So, I always feel like the goal is chaos and exhaustion. Let's create chaos and exhaust folks that are trying to do the right thing. Chaos
Yeah.
and
And
exhaustion.
the other thing about Chicago that is different is you had the court blocked the courts blocked the president
Mm,
from federalizing the Illinois National Guard, right? And
mm-hmm,
then kind of essentially
mm-hmm,
deploying them against the governor's wishes. So he
mm-hmm.
federalized the Texas National Guard and sent Texas with the approval of Governor Abbott down in Texas. And that is unusual, right? We have a
Very.
federal system, each of the states have, sovereignty and they have powers under um the 10th Amendment. Oh my gosh. It's
Mm-hmm.
no. Uh, oh gosh, I should know this, but it's the 10th something. Anyway, all powers that are not already discussed in the Constitution go to the states, essentially is what it says. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a violation of that, right? So it raises some even bigger questions. So now the governor of one state is acquiescing and allowing their National Guard to get sent to another state over the objections of that governor. And actually, shockingly, the Oklahoma governor said, mm-mm, no, that you can't do that, right? Like, so you've got,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma is a very, very pro 47 state.
Oh yeah.
So, so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a huge red flag. And
Mm-hmm.
then, and then in Portland, they tried to get around that court order that said, no, you can't federalize and deploy the Oregon National Guard. So they then
Mm-hmm.
went and took their California people that they'd already federalized and tried to send them. And that same
Mm-hmm.
judge was like, no, that's an end around.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Can't
I
do
mean,
that. Yep. Yep.
and yeah, so it's just, and there's not an invasion. There's not, federal law enforcement, ICE
Mm-hmm.
they are implementing federal laws, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all just a pretext. But anyway, I guess I just
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
talk it through because it just feels like there's a lot of folks who are unaware. I had
Mm-hmm.
someone just say the other day, well, it felt safer in Washington, D.C. But I'm like, well, I don't, it's a big city. I mean, yeah, there's crime everywhere. Okay, but so maybe it is safer. Maybe there is less crime, but they
Well,
can't
I've
stay
said
there
it's safe.
permanently.
I was going to say it. Let me be clear. It is absolutely safer than the past, but let's not, Lisa, let's go back to our methodology, our cause and effect. We can't say that it's safer because National Guard is there. It's
Right,
safer,
right.
in my humble opinion, because fewer people are going there to deal with whatever is going to happen with the National Guard. So instead of there being the same number of people being safer, it's less people, which lessens the probability that it will be unsafe.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
that's such
saying.
a yeah. And then in the same conversation, there are a number of people that live in DC, and they were like, "There's so many people just moving out." Like they don't, in
There
part
you
because of all
go.
the layoffs at the federal government, so they can't afford to live there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But that's changing the
Mm-hmm.
whole face of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of my response. Well, maybe it's because no one's there anymore, right? But um
There
it
you
is, but
go.
it's
Hit the nail.
also even if the presence of a National Guard in a city decreases street crime, because that's what we're talking about, right? Because there's a whole host of other shitty crime going on, like white collar crime and crime that happens within the home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can't permanently have, well, theoretically, you would not permanently deploy the National Guard to be on the streets, right? So I guess there's
Mm-hmm.
not unusual to me to say, well, if there's a greater police or military presence, then there might be less carjackings because
Mm-hmm.
there's, like that doesn't, but you can't, you would have to just permanently keep that presence there, which might be the end
Mm-hmm.
game, I guess, for
Yeah.
it to
Yeah, that's right.
remain
Mm-hmm.
limited. So it just,
That's right. That's right.
so it's yeah, and I just want, I don't know, same thing. I wish people were a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
aware or educated about the degree of how extreme this is, I guess.
Yeah. How extreme it is and how extreme and unsustainable it is, I would
Yeah.
suggest.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, on that cheery note,
Oh, oh, no, no, we're always calling people to more awareness, and I realize that we,
mm,
skirt the line between being over-informed. But with that, I do think, let's lift our head up out of the sand and look around and make sure that we're aware of historically, this is not normal. This may be
yeah,
normal today, but it has not been normal over decades. Not normal. Not normal.
not normal. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, look, I think that's a wrap for this week, Lisa. We touched on some things that are newer in our orbit because we cannot say that we are AI aficionados or military aficionados by any stretch, but pulled it together for tonight. But you certainly can reach out to us via our social media platforms, or you can just send us an email at info@unfazedpodcast.com or visit our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can find all of the old and new shows. And if you liked this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share this with friends, coworkers, others in this phase of your life. So until next time.
All right. See you next time.